is Ana Coello. I'm an architect and landscape architect. And tonight I will present a project for the Glorias Square in Barcelona that we did with the office Agence Terre, which is a landscape architecture office based in Paris and Germany. So we made a team for this competition also with other specialists from Barcelona, an agronomical engineer, a large engineering firm, specialist in environment. So this is the team we built, and this is the proposal we presented for the competition. So just a bit of a background in Barcelona. I guess maybe perhaps some of you or many of you know the city. This is the Strelka Plan that was done at the end of the 19th century for the enlargement of the city. And it's a very large grid. In this, let me see if I can point. No, is it possible to point with, no? No? Okay, no problem. So the Glorias Square is right at the middle of the picture, at the crossroads of the three of the axes that have sort of a free space in the center. So let me see. Okay, so the axis I'm talking about is the axis of Gran Via, which crosses the street from east to west. The axis of Diagonal, which is one of the main civic axes of Barcelona, and also an axis for vehicles. And the axis of Meridiana, which was for many years the main entrance to Barcelona from the north. During the Olympic Games, a big ring road was built around the city, but until then, this was a very important entrance road to the center of the city. So Glorias was the crossroads of these three very important roads, and it was for many years a very important point for transit. And it was its only dimension, we would say, because it worked, so it solved the problem of the cars, but it didn't really solve the problem of the city or of pedestrians. So what we had was in the 70s an elevated interchange with a sort of a park spaces below, but it was sort of disconnected. And in the 90s, there was an operation to transform this into a better space. And the project that was done was very good. It was very interesting. It was a park on the inside, the elevated ring road to pass the axis of Gran Via, and then a parking in this ring that would allow people to sort of come to the city, park their car, and leave in public transport. This was a better project, but it was still a big fracture in the city because people couldn't cross from the north to the south. It was a point where pedestrians really weren't invited. So Glorias has been for many years an area of the city that expelled pedestrians instead of attracting flows of people. This is part of the analysis we did when we started the competition, where we analyzed the green open spaces of Barcelona. So on the left, you have the Pla Cerdà, this extension plan at the end of the 19th century that we're talking about, where you would have, the city was supposed to be very green, with green spaces inside the blocks, with large green spaces in the west and the east of the city, with all the sea line. That was also a very important public space. The existing situation is much more dense, and there's a less green public space than it was originally intended. So, of course, the interiors of the blocks have been privatized, and the city is more mineral, and the public space is more fragmented than it was originally meant. Then we did an analysis of the parks in Barcelona, where we would analyze whether they were more mineral or more green. This is the diagram in the bottom, and whether they were small scale or large scale. So we found a lot of spaces in the city that were rather small, more like urban squares, and more mineral, and less large parks. And then the analysis on the top would be whether also on the axis is vertical axis is small scale versus large scale, and then whether they would be, well, mineral and green, and whether they would be on slopes or in flat areas. So we found out that all the larger spaces in Barcelona would be in the slopes, because the areas that have been sort of not developed were the areas that were difficult to build on. So on the slopes of Montjuic, on the slopes of Collserola, and these are the large parks. Most of the large parks in Barcelona now are on slopes. So Glorias was the opportunity to create a large park for the city in a central area, in a flat, sort of connected area. It was a big opportunity. So this at the top diagram, you have the green strategy of the city for now, for the green spaces, sort of the evolution of those diagrams we saw before, where now there is an idea to connect the green spaces of the city, to sort of create green axes connecting these spaces so that people can go from the mountains, the Collserola area, which is a sort of a large natural area, to the coastline and can connect both areas through these. These green axes are not necessarily always green. They sometimes pass by streets, by boulevards, avenues. They connect parks, but it's a series of spaces that people can walk or bike in a sort of in a continuous line. And Glorias was in one of these axes, so connecting the Park of Ciudadela, future Park of Sagrera Station, the Park of Trinidad. It would be in one of these axes. So for us, one of the ideas of the competition was to transform these axes of traffic that had been crossing at this point until now into axes for pedestrians, into axes for civic spaces and city flows. So you would still have the Diagonal as a very important civic axis. Then this green axis we were talking about, connecting all these parks. And also we would recover two more sort of civic axes, which one would be the Rec Contal, which is an old irrigation network of Barcelona that now disappeared, but that could resurface in the area. And also the Carretera de Ribes, or Meridiana, which is, a Carretera de Ribes is an old entrance into the city, and sort of also recovered as a pedestrian path. So then the three main strategies of the competition. The first one on the top was to create a continuous ground plane that would connect all the neighborhoods. So really to create the topography of the space is a bit complicated because there's a lot of infrastructure below. So we worked at the topography a lot to try to create a space that was flat, or at least gave the perception of being flat, that would have no fractures so that people could sort of cross from one neighborhood to another, and all the city around it could be connected. The second strategy would be to create a continuous tree canopy that would cover the green axis that we were talking about, and that would be a connector in two senses. It would be a connector for ecology, so it would connect this green axis in the ecological dimension, and also a connector for people. So it would cover the flows of people walking around, and so the pedestrian paths would always be accompanied by this continuous tree cover. And then the last strategy was to create nodes, which would be vertical points of connection between these two planes that we're talking about. So we have the continuous ground plane, we have this tree canopy, and there were the points of connection between these two levels that we called nodes. That would be the points in black in the park, happening at specific points in the park. So the nodes would be points of intensification, we said, for nature and for people. So some of the nodes would be destined exclusively for nature. So the intention is to make them natural refuges, so points of biodiversity and points of where it's exclusively for nature and people can't even access. Another points of intensification of program, so there are gardens of different kinds, meeting spaces of different kinds where more things happen. So these would be the nodes. And then there would be sort of a path that would connect all the nodes in the park. Oh, sorry. So these are, in the center, you have the diagram of biodiversity, where in the sort of the nodes that are filled in are the ones that are reserved as natural spaces. And it was based on an ecological diagram of stepping stones, where you can say, well, that even if two natural spaces are not directly connected through the corridor, if you have stones, species will sort of jump from one to another, like a stepping stone in a river, and will sort of maintain this ecological connection. So the location of these nodes in the south of the square was following this idea. Then on the right, you have the diagram of softscape versus hardscape, where this responds a bit to the urban conditions, where there's the area in the north of the square is more related to residential areas. It's a very dense area of the Eixample that is connected to the park in the north. There's a lot of people living there. There's not very many free spaces. So the side of the operation that was more, that could be understood more as a park was more in the north, which is the softscape, the greener area. And the area on the south, on the other side, is connected to metropolitan facilities, to an office area, to universities, and also to a public transport interchange node. So this would be the area of the intervention that is more like a square, more paved, more continuous. But on the other side, this would be sort of intermixed with this natural refugees or the natural nodes. And then on the left, there was the water management strategy, where we tried to sort of design a very clear water management strategy that would make the park sustainable. Because there is rain in Barcelona, but there's as much rain as in Paris, for example. But it rains very strong at certain moments of the year, so a lot of the water is lost. So we try to accumulate this water in certain deposits and try to direct it to the nodes in the south, and also create a very big point of accumulation of water in the north over this Recontal that we were talking about. So there was also this very important idea of making the park very sustainable. This is what the nodes we were talking about. This would be the natural refugees, more in the south of the square. We divided them in two types, the wet micronode and the dry micronode. So they would, we're working on this right now, but they are done with sort of autochthonous or natural vegetation. And the intention is to make them as sustainable as possible. So they're intended not to have irrigation, to have the nature of the place, and to sort of work by themselves as a piece of forest in the area would do. And there's two kinds of sort of habitats, the dry Mediterranean forest and the more humid area around the rivers. So the wet micronode is a bit sort of sunk in to collect water, to retain water, and to be a more humid space. And we're now working also on the kind of soil, on the kind of how to retain water in a sort of natural way without having to just continuously add with irrigation. And these are two examples of the program micronodes. This was a competition proposal to have the immersion garden, which would be connected to the exit of the subway station. So it would be a garden around the exit of the subway station where people would go out of the subway in the square and already be in a park or a garden. And then on the other, this is another of the programmed nodes, which was the total opposite. This one we call the Skywalker. It was meant to be an exotic garden with an elevated walkway that would allow people to go up, sort of cross this canopy, and be, from a vantage point, be able to recover all the most important elements of the skyline of the city. So it was more or less this idea where you sort of go up, and the experience of going up would be sort of a monument in itself to show the biggest elements of the city. We don't have many open spaces left in Barcelona, so a very important thing of this open spaces is how you sort of see the mountains, see the sea, see the Sagrada Familia, because you're usually between buildings and between streets, so you don't have all these views. Then also the square is a very complex space because it has a lot of infrastructure, it has a lot of buildings around, well, it has very different neighborhoods around it. So there's this idea of the city to sort of remove the car from the area. So cars would now cross just on the left side and on the top, and the rest would be public transportation. So our position on that was to sort of divert all the public transportation to the south of the square to liberate as much the largest area possible for the park. And then we proposed a big exchange point of a public transport between the subway and the tram and the bus, all the buses at one spot at the south of the square. There was also a very big issue whether to cross the Diagonal, which is a very important civic axis of the city. But we thought the Diagonal should be, at this point, left only for pedestrians and bicycles. Then there was also a part of the commission of the competition was to redefine this border, because the border of Glorias now is very heterogeneous, it's not defined. So we had sort of a certain number of square meters of facilities and residential buildings to sort of configure all the limits of the new square. So at the diagram on the right, you have in pink, the housing facilities, which had to be located in very specific plots. So this is tied to sort of the urban legislation of the moment. And then the blue buildings are the public facilities, which is there's a great variety of programs and uses. There's health facilities, there's residence for the aged, there's a nursery school, there's a primary school. There's really a big variety of ages and uses in these public facilities. And what we try to do with that is what happens in the diagram in the center, to sort of use this in favor of the park and try to extend the programs of the facilities into the park. So for example, in the north, we have these three buildings are the music school, the primary school, and the nursery school. So around it, we built the node at the top left-hand corner would be the sort of the Nodo Ludoteca, which was sort of the play area for the park. And then more in the south, where there's the big facilities, there's a big market, there's the design museum, there's the universities. All the activities were meant to be more on the metropolitan scale. And at the right side, we had a home for the elderly. So there we're working more in a garden for manipulation, for planting, for vegetable garden. So how the program of the facilities could sort of extend into the park and program it also. This is a work we did of comfort in the park. So there's temperatures in winter and in summer. So what places are warmer in summer, more exposed to the sun? What places are cooler sorry, I think I said it the wrong way around. Cooler places in the summer and warmer places in the winter. So studying the winds and studying the sun exposure and making sure there's all kinds of spaces in the park. So this just very quickly is to show you the complexity of what is happening below grade. This is the infrastructure. So we have the metro and the train that is below. Then we have the tunnels that will pass Gran Via below the surface, which is the largest operation that will be done, that will make the park possible, actually. Then we have, this is the Recontal, which we intend to resurface, if possible. And then we started thinking about points of connection between this sort of underground and the surface. So this was, if some nodes could actually connect these spaces below grade and the surface. And then we start going up. So these are the areas of the nodes of intensity. This is the ground plane where we're seeing the sort of the softscape and the hardscape and the nodes that you can't go into. And then this is the canopy. So this is level +5. So this is still areas that are accessible and not accessible. And this is already the tree canopy. So the lower trees that cover the space. And this is already the canopy at 15, 20 meters height. So it shows that there's an area covered with trees at the south, at the north of the park. Okay, and this is the diagonal, this last step. And the last one is the skywalker, this element that we were showing before, where you sort of, at the crossroads of Diagonal, Gran Via, and Meridiana, there's this sort of walkway that will allow you to go up and see all the most important elements of the city. So this is the park, the plan that we presented at the competition, where, just to go very quickly through the areas, we have what we call the urban balcony in the north, which is more of a square dimension, more connected to the residential areas in the park, and which acts like a balcony over the area. The Rethinking, which is sort of recover, is the blue line in the middle. In this area, in the center, which you see is a very open area, is what we call the Gran Clariana, which is the large, open, flexible space of the park. So it's another of the nodes, but it's like a very large, open, flexible space for all sorts of uses. And then in the south, we have this sort of crossroads of pedestrian flux, the nodes, and the largest canopy. So this would be a sort of a preview of some of the areas of the park. This would be more the south, where you have the transport interchange, the nodes, the sort of the natural nodes, and the square, the paved area that connects all the spaces. And this would be a view from the balcony on the north over the Recontal, over the space of the Gran Clariana towards the canopy in the south. So just, I will very quickly pass a video that, let me see if I can manage. Sort of is a walk through the park and explains these ideas. Is it possible to have the sound? No. No. Seems very loud. So we're walking through all the areas of the park. Now I'll just read a text that was in Catalan in the video in the end, but I translated to English. So Glorias is more than a park. It's a hybrid between a square and a park. It intends to be a driving force for the transformation of the city into an urban ecosystem. Energy self-sufficiency, economical usage of resources, digital technology, and efficient mobility are some of the vectors that are destined to develop more widely throughout the city. Glorias is the cornerstone for a new urban dynamic and for the deployment of an ecological strategy that reaches out to the whole Catalan metropolis. A comfortable nature at the disposal of the citizen. So, so that's all. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to say thank you very much to, where? This one? Oh, this one, okay. Thank you very much for Strelka Institute and the City of Moscow for the invitation. It was fantastic to come here. It is fantastic also to be here in a so free space and free feelings that we can express, we can share ideas and architecture and work together with architects and designers here in Moscow. It's fantastic. So thank you very much to Maria, to Natasha, thank you very much, and all to you for your interest. I think that I'm here because I am an architect of Barcelona, And I am here to express about the routine of Barcelona. How is our work? How do we do architecture in Barcelona? I think that the city where we came, the city where we grew, express a little bit about ourselves. So our thoughts, how do we create, how do we think, it's a little bit also expressed by the city that we come from. So before explaining a little bit about some buildings that we have done or some projects, I can also explain a little bit about Barcelona, about my city, no? The first of all that I would say about my city, about our city, is that Barcelona is quite a dense city. Density is very important, and it could be understood as a problem, but at the end it's not so much. That the density is not so uncomfortable, and makes some things happen. For example, it makes that the urban space, the free space, the parks are very important because they are not so many. Also, for example, it's more sustainable from the services of the city. The transportation and everything is much more simple because the distances are not so big. And then there's 3 million people living in a not so extensive city. The density is quite big. It's 6-7 levels of houses, and everywhere is the same density, or more or less. No, it's important to know that. How does it work? Also, something very important of our city is that uses are very mixed. You see here, for example, a tall building. This is the Plaza de las Glorias that we have seen now, the new project. But you can see dwellings and offices and a church and a theater, and everything is mixed, everything is together. This is very important because this is a city. A city is where a place you can find a Strelka Institute, you can find tourists not far away from here, you can find a shop, you can find dwellings, and everything is mixed. The mix of use, it's very important, making also the distances a little bit lower and a little bit more easy for the people. No, the mobility is very important. The model of our city is very important. The public transportation, and one of the transportation, it could be a tram, it could be a metro, it could be a bicycle, or the most important one is just walking. It's very important to go walking from one place to the other. That makes also quality of life, quality of moving yourself, no? Not depending on cars. It's also a sustainable thing, no? Public space, as Anna was explaining just a moment ago, one space, one public space, one park is for Barcelona people very, very important, because we are a lot and we are very, very narrow, we are very dense, and every little space has to be very well defined, has to be very well worked, has to be very well resolved, and we have to put a lot of energy as architects and landscape architects to draw it, to make it very, very, not only beautiful, of course, beautiful is good, but also very useful and make people a little bit feel better, and make them feel that this is also their space, theirs, belongs to the people, no? Also, we have to work with some skills, with some important things that we have worked in our office about the public space. For example, maintenance is very important, has to be easy to maintain. The energy efficiency is also very important, and we have to illuminate it, for example, with the best lights that doesn't take too much energy. I wanted also to express very shortly a couple of projects that we have done. This is a small square in the center of the city, in the ancient city, in the old city, which is called Plaza Villa de Madrid. And it's a place where some centuries, some decades ago, so maybe 30 years ago, they were discovered a very important ruins from the Romans. So it's 20 centuries old, this place. These ruins, very, very important ruins from the... they were, of course, very well protected, and they were very important to be there. And we had to make a square and a garden surrounding these ruins. And what we did is, thinking that the old space of the city had not so much gardens, we made a public garden, and this was a little bit. We had to figure out how to organize the Roman space, the archaeological space, with the garden, how to connect one to the other. We solved it with different plans. Of course, the Roman figures were down and we were up in the level of the street. So then we had to make some topography to put them together. And this topography was the garden itself. No? This is the topography. We had to make these figures here to maintain some trees that were pre-existing. And we made it with this kind of Corten iron, which is metal walls. And this was a bridge, which from this direction you see the Roman necropolis, and then from the other side of the bridge you can see the garden. No, it's a public garden that anyone can use. Well, the first point of view to see the garden of the archaeological garden, we put a special element just to mark. From here you can see the garden. This is a right place to see the garden to be seen. No? We made also a port, which is the Port Forum. It was a port made for the Forum de las Culturas in the 2004. So it's 10 years ago now. And we made some buildings and also the public space of the port. Even in the port, we thought it was a port is a port, marina, but we act as it was a public space from the city also, no? This is the project that we did with these buildings and the surface between the buildings and the water. This was the project about the garden and the avenues inside the port. The buildings, the cross sections of the buildings, also those was commercial. The most important things, for example, is that in the roof of the buildings which were commercial, we were always thinking that these roofs should be also useful, and we thought that the roofs were not has to be just a roof of the building. They had to be also public space, no? So in the upper part of the buildings that we made, there are always also new spaces for pedestrians, for glancing to the sea and enjoy the port. No? Those are these spaces. It's not possible to point. Well, those are these spaces here. Here is also those are the buildings, the spaces, free spaces. Okay, so then we try to figure out how to make a building, but at the same time, not only a building, to mix it with the public space. This is underneath, in the port part, in the public sector with the commercial area. And the urbanization, how to urbanize, how to make the lamps and how to organize things in the public space is also something very important. At the end, a small detail, a lamp could be very important in this kind of works. When you work in public space, the strategy is very important, but at the end, you have to always make the correct decision about what's the light that you're going to use. No? For example, this is something that we did. We did these lamps which are always inclinated in different directions. During the construction moment, there were so many trucks going here and there that some of them had some golpes, I don't know. So they had damage, no? But they had boom. But because they were all inclinated, nobody noticed it, and they worked very well. The quality of architecture is maybe also a way of understanding also Barcelona and the city like ours. I think that the Catalan architecture, the architecture from Barcelona was always something understood as a part of the culture. It's not a way of making buildings. It's a way of making culture. So we understand that our culture. Maybe it depends also from the idiom and whatever. But the architecture is also a part of it. No? So then when we're making a building, we are doing something also for our community. We're doing also it's something that's going to remain, to stay there for a long time. So it's quite important to. It's my fault, no? So I will stay in the middle, so don't have so many problems. So it's quite important for us to be very conscious that we are making culture when we are building buildings. We are being intellectual. We are not sculptors, but we are doing something else. We are doing lots of things with some other engineers and politicals and economists. We have to involve a lot of people, but we are at the end building something for the future, for new generations. So it's a part of our culture, no? It's an abstract concept, but we try to put it also in some skills, in some things that for us are important. Quality of architecture means, for example, not only just culture, which is also important, but also things like making solar protections, trying to make to capture the heat from the facades, and not to have so lot energy using these buildings. For example, we made a wastewater treatment plant. This was like how to recycle landscape or the water in landscape. Or even simplicity of construction. Why should we build very complicated? To build complicated forms or build something very complicated has not a value by itself. No, it has to be very important to be able to make very interesting architecture but very simple construction. At the end, we're also using public resources, so then we have to use it as much better as possible and not waste money in general. No, we had to make something very simple but very interesting and very culturally advanced. For example, smart facades, prefabrication, trying to make different uses in different spaces, or making reused waste of materials, make the materials that come from the waste of other products. Those are things that are also helping for making a good quality of architecture. Housing. I could explain very briefly a couple of projects. This is a project that we built of normal dwellings for social dwellings. This is a house in front of a very small square, and we did at the same time the project of the house, of the dwellings, and of the public space. So we try to connect them one to the other through something so inexpensive and so simple as the color of the facade, as you will see. Those are the dwellings in the building, and this is the building in this place. In this place, we understood when we came that the place was, the people living in this place were people coming from the south of Spain. They had a very interesting relationship with the color, and they were a lot of blue houses, red houses, brilliant colors. They were very fascinating with these colors without no problem, no? We said, well, why don't we use also colors? Learning from them a little bit, no? So we said, well, let's put a big building, this building, let's put it with a strong color. Let's make a landmark also in the city. This is a social building, but it has not to be a secret building. It has to be something which we could be proud of it, no? So through the color, which is something very, very inexpensive and very simple, we create this landmark here in this in the landscape of the city, to say that this is a place. There is also a public space right here, which is going to be maybe a special place for this quarter of the city. No, as you see here also, we use the same color of the facade for the public space to make understandable that the facade of the building and the place of the public space were done at the same time. They were playing the same role. They were part of the same thing. The public building, also when this is a building of dwellings, of social dwellings, is a part of the urban landscape. The public space is, of course, a part of the urban landscape, so we make them play the same role together, no? This is the building. From the inside, these movements of windows are also very, very inexpensive. They are not taking much money for making a little displacement. And this is the effect from the inside, also the inside. Another building that we made is a building of office building. This is a building that we made in this situation, in a very difficult place that was a little bit not rectilinear. It was a little bit complex to fit the building there. So it was like moving. At the end, we decided to put the building in its place, but also to displace a little bit, to bring it to a side, to make it more regular. I will explain later on. The most important thing for us was a little bit to place the building, not interrupting the streets. We had the possibility of making the building stick to a part of to some other buildings, which had made bigger the urban space. But we thought it's not fair to interrupt the street of the urban fabric. The urban fabric is something very important. The public space is for us something very important. So that's why we had to put the building just in the place which the urban fabric goes through. No, it doesn't interrupt anything. No. These are the plans of the building. You will see here, maybe in the cross section, you see here how this part of the building is just put on the place, but then later on we displace a part of the building to one side to make the public space bigger and also to make it regular the plan of a building. This is the result. These are offices for Social Security, the Ministry of Work from Madrid. So these are public offices, okay? And it was also very important to these horizontal elements. They were calculated because then the sun doesn't come inside the building. It's very important to control very much if the sun goes inside, then you have to waste a lot of energy to cool the air inside. So if you avoid this energy to come inside, then you have less work to cool the place inside. No? It's more logic. It's very logical, but we almost never use it. No. This is the building. In the entrance, this is the space that we were very interested in. There is a square in one side, and there is like a street in the other side, and the organization and the proportion of this street were for us very important. And this is the building by itself, no? This is again the building in its place, which is a little bit moving from one side to the other. Inside. And the last project that I wanted to show you very briefly, because Vicente Guallart is also here, the chief architect from Barcelona. Well, welcome. This is the last one. So Vicente, you can get ready. This is the last project that I can show you. This is the last that we inaugurated maybe 3 weeks ago, something like that. It's pretty new. This is a library that we had to make in a garden. As we were always saying, always the same story, you know. Like Anna was saying, I was saying, public space is very important for us. It's even more important than buildings. So when somebody told us, you have a garden, and on the garden you can put a library, we said, well, no, I don't like the idea. No, why should we use a part of the garden to make a building, even when it is a public building, even when it's a cultural building as a library? We thought, why should we occupy and tear down some part of a public garden for making a building? No, let's make another solution. And we said, let's put it underneath. Let's put it under the garden. Okay, So this is a garden. You see it here, and under the garden there is a building that we have done. This is the situation. This is Sant Gervasi, which is a quarter of Barcelona, which is it's not a poor part of the city, but it's a very, very dense part, as you see in this picture. There's a lot of buildings everywhere, and there is a lack of public space quite clear. You almost don't find any park, any avenue, any public space. The only one is this garden in this surrounding. No? So they would say, well, this garden, we have to keep it, at least as much as possible. No? And then this is the idea that we have, to put the building underneath the garden. The garden goes until this line. The library goes until here. This is a pre-existing building, which was the origin of the garden, which is a villa, okay? And the library is underneath without occupying a part of the garden. Those are the plans. There are 2 plans of the library. In this moment, which was also important to think about how to make a library in our times. There was a big discussion about if libraries themselves make sense now when you have books in your telephone or your iPad, and the digital culture is coming very fast, no? Somebody will say, well, it doesn't make sense to make libraries and things like that because the books are going to disappear. This is not truth. This is the books are going to remain. The culture is going farther and farther. Which is very truth is that the concept of what is a library is going to change, and a library is not going to be a storage of books. It's going to be a place of culture and a place of knowledge, but not a place for making or having lots of books, no? Because you can have here, well, where is my phone? In your phone, in your mobile, you can have thousands of books here. Why should we have it when we need a building then, no? You need a building for having a space, for sharing culture, for sharing knowledge. You need a building for going there and feeling you as you were in home, so to feel you comfortable, to feel you go and share a book with another where you can connect with China and you can use culture as you like to. So, this is the roof of the garden again. This is the elevations. At the end of the elevation, the most important things that you see are the trees, not the wall. No, the wall of the library. No, these are the cross sections of the library. You see on the top the old building, the pre-existing building, and you see the library. I just forgot to say something very important. In this plan, you see that we didn't organize the library as a big space full of books, but assume of different smaller spaces to feel you a little bit more comfortable, to feel you a little bit at home. So every space is a little bit thought as you were a little bit in your living area, in your living room at home, no? So this is the result. This is the library from this point of view. You see the garden. You can use it. And then the interior is trying to, with the meubles, with the furniture, and with the use of these elements in the wall, they are trying to give you a sensation of warmness, of comfortable, of being very, very relaxing for using culture. And this is it. Thank you very much.
Я сейчас просто передам слово Giovanni Carnevalli, директору фонда Mies, благодаря которой вообще все это произошло. Giovanna расскажет немного, почему вы вообще пригласили Vicente, и расскажет о фонде, и вообще почему все это так важно. Мне кажется, часть людей, которые были уже на предыдущих сессиях, уже слышали эту информацию, но для остальных это будет очень полезно. Спасибо большое.
Добрый вечер. And sorry for the delay. We just arrived on late with a plane from Barcelona with the chief architect of the City Council of Barcelona, Vicente Guallart, which is now ending his presentation. But I want just to say some few words. I don't know who of you have been here since the beginning of these 3 events that we have been organizing with the Strelka. This was a sort of series of workshops that we are ending with Barcelona, organized with the Mies van der Rohe Foundation, that is organizing the European Union Prize for Contemporary Architecture, the Mies van der Rohe Award. And we want to talk about urban routines. So it's the same topic that Strelka have been developing during this winter course. So we brought this topic into the summer course, but in more specific, and let's say more concrete, more practice, because we have a real plot. And so there are some students, maybe some of them, they are repeating, so they are doing the 3 workshops, the 3 series. And we want to give a different approach to this plot. So different vision. We want to, Strelka actually asked how we can bring identities, which kind of vision we can give to this plot, and then inside a bigger vision of what could be this part of Moscow. I don't know if you know where the plot is. It's close to, the electric power plant close to Balchung, which is here in the island. And there is a real developer, and then there is a real interest to see which kind of vision, which is kind of strategy they can apply. So we had 3 cities. We started with Amsterdam, we followed with London, and we finally ended up with Barcelona. And each city bring a vision. Why the 3 cities? Because each one of them have built a strong identity, and this identity is not settled only by make few different buildings spread all around the city, but because they have a strategy in different scales, in any kind of scales of urban planning. So a building has a quality not only for the building itself, but for the context, and then inside a bigger and general vision of the city itself. And that's why we want to finish. We want to end it up with Barcelona, with, we have been listened, Tony Casamore and Ana Coelho, that we didn't want to bring all these star architects that, can come anyway, in any moment, Calatrava and so on. But we want to bring these architects that are really doing really good architecture through the urban routines, which anyway brings quality to the city. I think now the chief architect has finished his presentation. Is coming. Vicente Guallart, I leave you to the ending, to the conclusion of this, actually the trilogy of symposium. And then he can explain to us now the vision that Barcelona has in this moment. And this vision also really fits with all the projects that we have been listening before, especially with the project of Glorias. Thank you very much, Vicente. I leave you the words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For me, it's a pleasure to be here. 13 years ago, a group of architects, we founded in Barcelona the Institute for Advanced Architecture, IAC. I have been the director in the last 10 years, and I know that Strelka is a broader institute, like some other institutes of Europe that are trying to develop ideas, to do research, etc., about the future on cities and architecture. 3 years ago, I was appointed as chief architect of the city of Barcelona, and what I would like to explain you are the big ideas that we are using in order to think about the future on our cities. So you will see that the way we think about cities is not only about urban planning or about architecture, because we think that we need to reinvent the way we think about cities. We need to do it because when I was a student of architecture, we were always thinking about how we will make new urban planning, how will we grow in cities. But right now, at the beginning of the 21st century, most of the cities where we live are already done. So that means that the big structures of the cities are already here, and we have, let's say, two challenges. In one hand, to think how we expand in some areas the cities, but basically the big challenge that we have is how we transform the cities that are already urbanized. The big organizations of cities are already done, so it's not anymore about growing our city, because this is Barcelona, and as you can see, the city is already urbanized. So for us, the challenge is what we can do next. And there are like different, do you want to make a picture? Okay. He's making a picture. I can deliver the presentation later to the Institute. So, but I would like to say that there are two big challenges about the cities and about the planet. The first challenge is about the superpopulation. The population in the world, as you see, has been tripled in the last century. So that means that we are having a big challenge in relation with population, with urbanization, but also with climate change. You know that this is a document from the World Bank you can find in YouTube, where they explain that if we don't make anything, the world will increase 4 degrees the temperature, and then in many places where we have the sea around will be flooded. So from that point of view, the idea that we cannot be anymore, let's say, developing our city and developing on our economy based on industrial principles were related with the idea that all of us, we should have a car, we can consume energy that we need, etc. So that means that we need to rethink about how we make cities. Barcelona was founded 2,000 years ago. So that means that my job, there was someone 2,000 years ago that was the chief architect of the city of Barcelona, was a Roman. Maybe he was a military. They were creating the structure of the Roman city. And in the last 2,000 years, we have been thinking how to grow our city. But right now, as you can see, we are more or less here. We are in a moment of a big change. I will show you the main moments of our urban evolution. I also want to show you that this is the diagram that explains that Barcelona has a long tradition. We have some Roman city, we have some medieval city, we have 19th century city, and we have a modern city. And obviously we need to think about what will be the next city we need to build. You see also that we have good architectural samples from nearly all the moments of the history of Barcelona. So this is our Roman city that was founded like 2,000 years ago. And today, if you go to Barcelona, you can see some part of the Roman wall and some part of the old Roman city. But in the Middle Age, you see the Roman wall here in the center, and we built this medieval wall. And we have the city of Barcelona more or less like this until the middle of 19th century. So we have the old city surrounded by walls. We have some other small villas, and there was nothing around. The question was that the people in Barcelona voted in order to demolish the wall, and there was a discussion about how the city should grow. And then at that moment, the most important technology that we had was the steam train. And the people were saying that we should invent a new way to urbanize the territory where mobility and transportation should be a crucial element. So as you can see here, the city was never planned. So it was a kind of aggregation of buildings. But then in the middle of 19th century, we had the opportunity to think the future, the city of the future, and that's why the engineer Ildefons Cerdà made this master plan. He did a plan where all the buildings could have or should have a green area in the backyard and should have a street. He cut the corners of the buildings in order to promote a better mobility system. And when he was developing this plan, he invented the word urbanism. So that means that the word urbanism was invented in Barcelona at the middle of 19th century, and we have been following this drawing, this map, this master plan in the last 150 years. We'll see later that the only thing that really we didn't finish was the central square that Anna will explain you later. So as you can see, we have been building all these blocks with small housing buildings and also some industrial buildings. And this is Sagrada Familia when at the beginning of the construction, because we are still building the Sagrada Familia. So part of our tradition is to build the Sagrada Familia for more than 100 years. So we like to build the Sagrada Familia very much. And, but in the middle, at the beginning of 20th century, there was another revolution related with cars. And as you can see, cars generate some other style of living, style of cities. So this was the city that was developed in America. So this American style of life with the suburbia. That means that every technology generates one way to build the city. And the question is, now we have another revolution, that the third, what is called the third industrial revolution, is related with computers. And for us, the question is how we can make cities use new principles. So if the city, if Barcelona is already built, if the physical structure is already built, and we have a new way to live in the planet. So internet has changed our life, but it hasn't changed our cities. The question is, how will be the cities based on internet or based in distributed technologies? So as you can see, this is the city that is more or less already built. It's a wonderful city, it's full of tourists. I mean, there is a lot of economical activity, but the question is how we can keep adding value to the city that is already here. So obviously we have a master plan. That means that we have a vision that explains which will be the main projects we will be developing in the next years. But to have an urban plan is not enough. You need to have really an idea about how you want to live in the next years. And that's why we say we have a plan. We have an idea about how the people will live in the information society. And we think that what we should create city-oriented cities. We should build cities at the scale of the humans and not at the scale of the cars. The center of our project should be the people. Our mayor say I am the mayor of the people, and we work really in order to create a good quality of life for the people. And from that point of view, what we think is that we should promote the local production of goods. Now, in the 90s, we thought Barcelona should design products, and in China, they will fabricate. This is a disaster. So this is a global economy where you are just working and going to the shopping mall, and you don't have any control of anything because you don't make anything. You only work in front of a computer, and you go to the shopping mall in the Saturday, that's over. This was the end of the industrial economy, and in the information economy, in the YouTube economy, everyone is producing and is consuming products. So the idea is that we should really try to empower our cities. We should try to produce resources locally. Barcelona was an industrial city, and we want to become, again, an industrial city, but not a traditional industrial city, but a 21st century industrial city. That means that we want to produce locally energy, things, and food, and we want to do this while we are connected with information networks to the world. So this could be an ideal diagram about how people will be connected, but also we could think that those are cities that in fact are connected. As I say in my first slide, we live in a world of cities. That means that cities are the places where we live, the places where we work, where we love, and where we die. And the question is, we need to promote a world where cities and people are connected and we produce things because we have the tools locally, but we share our knowledge using the technology of information. So that's why we have some ideas about how we want to transform our city. And the new mantra is that we want to make our city a self-sufficient city. I will explain you. So the first idea I want to tell you is that we have a mantra. We print this mantra in every office in the city hall that say that we want to transform our city in a city created by productive neighborhoods that work at human speed. And these neighborhoods will be connected with other neighborhoods and will be connected to the world. So we want to make a kind of a slow city inside a smart city. And I will show you some samples that are connected with this. I always say that more than an architect, I am a person that likes to draw, but in general, I draw with PCs and not with Macintosh. So I think I will be not able to draw. What a pity. It's the best moment in my lecture. Do you have a mouse? No. Okay, don't worry. I will make some drawings personally later. Because basically what I would like to explain you is if you imagine about the future of cities, we can imagine some cities that, for example, in Latin America, where we have a rich center and a poor periphery. Today we see how cities are becoming really, really, really very big. And then we could imagine a city where a center that it has a very clear center, and then we have a suburbia around. There are other cities where we have many centers in those cities. For example, Seoul or LA are cities with many centers. But the Barcelona model is not like this. Barcelona is based in neighborhoods, and what we like to do is to make a network of neighborhoods. So that's why when we think about what is a neighborhood, that means a neighborhood is something like this. It's a small portion of a city where the people can walk to any place, and then they can go to a library, a swimming pool, and a school, a health center, etc. So the idea of the neighborhoods, you see, Barcelona is a city with 73 neighborhoods, and what we want to build is a city that has many of those neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods are connected to each other. In order to show you that this is true, for example, this is the map of the municipal markets in Barcelona. We have around 45 markets. Each market has a distance of 500 meters that in theory is the distance that the people can walk to go to buy. So people doesn't use cars in this situation, people can walk. And we want to promote that the people is able to buy food just by walking. But also we want to promote, this is the diagram, for example, for the health centers. So you see here the health center and the area and the people that is supporting. So that means that we have a city in this case with around 45 health centers, or we have also kindergarten, or we have research centers or libraries, as the one Tony showed us. The library is here, and if we see an area where we don't have a library, we will put a library there because we want to make a city that is very equal everywhere. So that means in Barcelona, obviously we have an historical center and we have some areas of development, but with independence of the urban form, what we want to create is an structures of neighborhoods. And for example, this is sport halls, and Barcelona we have a huge network of sport halls where the people can walk to play sport, etc. So that means that this is small green areas, and those are also the big global, let's say, hotspots in our city. So that means that Barcelona has some areas with a strong economical development, but what is really crucial for us is the idea of creating a city of neighborhoods. London is also a city of neighborhoods, where we have a center that is the city, but you can discover, no, don't worry. No, don't worry. It's okay. It's okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, okay, so the first idea is the idea of the neighborhoods. The second idea is that today we have a centralized energy production. This is the traditional economy, industrial economy model, where we have nuclear plants or wind turbine plants that provide energy to city. But we want to transform our city to a city where we produce the energy locally. And we want to do by mixing different technologies that will allow to do retrofitting of our blocks, connecting the production of energy with the blocks to the electrical car, for example. So this is exactly the new economy. This is the equivalent to YouTube. This is the Internet of Energy, the idea that every building is able to produce energy, and then we share with the other buildings. We create, let's say, local economy of energy by producing this energy locally. And we have a self-sufficient block, we'll have a self-sufficient neighborhood. So we want to create networks of energy everywhere in the city of Barcelona. We are also, this is the big central part that we have, and we are interested on producing food again near our city. Today we are buying some tomatoes that are produced in Brazil, and they send by a container. We lose 50% of our food in containers instead of producing the food locally. So our vision of the city is cities must be productive again, and we need to produce things locally. For example, this is the industrial side. Blue used to be industrial buildings, red residential buildings. But right now, all the industry has gone to the periphery or to China. And what we want to do is to use the new technologies in order to produce things again in our city. By the way, we have a Macia Plan where we are producing the electrical taxis of New York are produced in Barcelona. So we need to use really new technologies in order to produce new form of transportation. But this is different. This is a 3D printed bike. We want that our bikes will be produced in our city in the next 15 years. So that means if we have right now new technologies that allow local production of goods, we should really promote these technologies in our city. So this is also, we are learning how to use robots. This is IAC, where we were learning how to use Kukan robots to 3D print buildings. But this is not only about architecture, it's about cars, medicine, food, construction. Everything will be related with 3D printed. And by the way, we are also experimenting with new forms of architecture. This is the first solar house that was produced in Barcelona using laser cutters. As you see, the form is very special because it's using parametric design. So from the City Hall, we are promoting new forms of architecture that integrate solar production of energy with good design. This is another sample of a solar house that is just in front of the sea. So that means that we are right now starting, you remember that diagram about self-sufficient blocks. We want to apply this to real buildings, and the new competitions that we are doing are related exactly with this. We are also burning our trash in order to produce the power that we need for lighting our city. So our vision on urban development is not only about housing, streets, etc. We are thinking about architecture and urbanism, also including energy, water, trash, and many other elements that are part of the city itself. Another question is that, well, this is a human body, and the anatomy, the science of anatomy is equal everywhere, and that's why we developed this drawing. This drawing is very useful for us. This is the anatomy of a city. This drawing explains that the city is created by an environmental layer, information, water cycle, energy, matter cycle, mobility, and nature, and then the build domain with a multi-scalar approach. Then we have the society with the people, and we have the information flows. That means that in the same way that Cerdà invented what it was called the urbanism, and then he tried to create good quality of life for the people, that in fact, for the new developments, we are using these diagrams in order to develop our urban projects. As you can see, we are using architecture and urbanism, not only talking about buildings, blocks, or neighborhoods, but we are integrating environment, we are integrating energy and information, and obviously we do this in order to make a good quality of life for the people. Our budget, like every budget, is limited, and then you need to decide where you put your money every time you develop a project. And this is a good sample about how to transform a city without changing all the buildings and all the streets. So this is Curitiba with the bus network that was invented, and this is the bus network of Barcelona. This is our bus map. And I never take the bus in Barcelona. So you can see it's like impossible to understand where a bus is going from where to where. It's really impossible because the bus system is a very old system that every time we were adding some lines. So that's why we decide that instead, let's say, to improve a little bit this system, we are changing completely our bus system. And what we are doing is we are doing a grid where we will have only vertical lines and horizontal lines. That means that with this map, we'll be able to go, we'll find a bus stop anywhere in less than 5 minutes walk, and we'll be able to go from any place to any place, only changing once the bus. So that means that we are promoting public transportation, and this is very important. You will see later with the project we are developing in Plaza de las Glorias. Also, our bus is electrical bus. We already buy one of those electrical buses, and in the next 10 years, all the buses will be electrical in Barcelona. We are also developing a new economy based in new technologies, and that's why when we are thinking how to use Wi-Fi in the public space, we are working with companies like Cisco in order to develop a new technological system where everywhere in the city we'll have Wi-Fi and we'll have sensors. So we are developing a big network of information platform that will be everywhere in our city. And we are doing this because we are developing the city operation system. We are working connecting information with urbanism. And that means that in the same way that we have power and water everywhere in the city, we want to bring information in order to allow all of us to be connected to the Wi-Fi, to the network, but also in order to promote new services like better management for parking, for lighting, and for many services. So that means that our vision is connecting something that is more abstract, more technological, with something very traditional as the city. We are also working with resiliency. In Barcelona, it doesn't rain too much, but when it rains a lot. So this is what every time that it rained, like 25 ago, we have big floods. And then we decide to develop a plan in order to avoid this. So this is, we make an analysis about our city, and what we understood is that we have some peaks, and the idea was to reduce those peaks, and in order to do this, what we did was to build 13 huge water tanks that will allow that when it rains, we can store the water here, and then we can leave the water slower to the water system. So the bigger buildings in Barcelona are not built by architects, are built by engineers, and they are underground. But by making this, we really can have a better public space, a better public management of our city in order to avoid that when it rains a lot, the city is collapsed. The crucial question is that we are doing all of this in order to promote a better quality of life. I will make a short introduction about this project, about the project of Plaza de las Glorias. If you remember, this was the central square of Barcelona where Gran Via, Diagonal, and Meridiana should be crossing. So this was the main central square of Barcelona. But in the 90s, we built a highway because we were still in the industrial economy. We were thinking the park and ride model where the cars could come from the periphery, could park here and then take a metro. But we understand that this model is over, and what we want to do is to transform this place really in the center of our city. So the idea is to have two main green avenues that will be crossing the city. Those were the previous diagrams, and then Anna will show you which is the final version, because after making this idea, with the situation of demolishing the highway, we decided to launch a competition that was won by Anna. So this is the highway that we used to have, because as you can see, we already start to demolish the highway in order to create the park. So in September, the highway will be gone. This is one of the few cities in Europe that is still demolishing highways in the center of the city in order to increase the surface for the people. We are also working in the high-speed train, and we are covering all these train lines with a big park. You can see here, we are covering all of this, and will be a 4-kilometer park. This is the area called La Sagrera. It's very near Plaza de las Glorias. Another crucial question is that I am the chief architect of the city of Barcelona, but my department is called Urban Habitat. And Urban Habitat, we put together the people from the ecology, the engineers, and the architects. So that means that if you really want to do a big transformation in your city, you need to break silos. You need to change the way the administration is organized, and that's why we create a department that is managing all of this. That means we work together with environment, urbanism, infrastructures, and ICT. And the last thing I would like to say is that what we want to do is to connect cities. Cities, we need to work together, because in fact, all the solutions, technologies, design that we are using in one city, at the end is also used in another city. So following this idea of a world organized by cities, cities are connected, and what we want to do is collaborate with other cities like Moscow in order to promote a better organization of the world. When in July we had a big event about digital fabrication. This is Neil Hersenfried from MIT. This is the mayor of Barcelona. We decide, the mayor explained something similar to what I explained, and then the people from MIT say, if you agree, if this is your vision, we should generate a deadline. So we already create a countdown, and we will have 40 years in order to transform all those ideas that I explained into the reality. So if you come, maybe some of you that are younger, you will come to Barcelona in 40 years. I hope I will be there. But if I'm not there, you should look if we produce food locally, we print 3D printing bikes, and we generate the energy locally. If this is true, this lecture will make sense. If not, you will think that I am a liar. I hope I will not be a liar. See you in 40 years in Barcelona. Thank you.
I invite now Anna, Tony, and Vicente to sit down. And if there is any question to you, to the audience, this is the moment. Yeah.
Hello, thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. For me personally, I'm a great amateur of Barcelona. I've been there 3 times. So I have kind of, very simple maybe question about your point of view. As far as I know, in Barcelona you have kind of a complicated loop, or I don't know what's the exact streets of them, but they are near Park Güell. There is a kind of crossroads where, youth hostels are and students' dwellings are. There is a place around, and there is a kind of road that goes in some kind of complicated way. I used to hear from locals that it's a kind of still unsolved problem. So my question, maybe you understand what I'm talking about, and you can tell your opinion about this and how you see this development of this place, because I think it's very interesting from a urban point of view. No?
You should come to Barcelona and we could walk around.
Maybe.
Maybe you are thinking about Plaza de les Ceps, that is somewhere in the middle of the city. There are many places where there is a lot of construction going on. For example, Plaza de las Glorias also is a place where many transformations are under development. But in general, the people can walk, can cross around, and there is no major problems. Sometimes the people criticize that we have a lot of tourists, but and that's why we are also trying to open all the city and also the metropolitan area for visitors, because in general the people, they like to come only to few places, but there are many other places to visit. So we develop a new plan of tourists in order to promote other areas of the city, and but in general, Barcelona is a quite calm city.
Okay, and so these complicated, for instance, there is a network of kind of dead places which is still uncertain. Are there already specialists who are involved in solving it, or are they still like left to the municipality? Or
no, we, for example, we did something in some because of the crisis. We have, for example, more than 800 free plots in the city that it will take some years to be developed. What we did was to launch a competition to offer the citizens to develop their own projects there. So we call the Voids project, and more than 20 associations, they present to those projects. Some of them wanted to make architecture spaces, other also growing food or other activities. So we are also using some parts of our activities, our properties, in order to promote, let's say, transformation by the citizens directly.
Okay. One more question, please, if you don't mind. You remind me about like urban food, or I don't know. I know the example about Berlin, where they have places like where bottom-up approach was raised with the Prinzessin Garden, and where people started to grow by themselves different fruit and vegetables. Do you have the same in Barcelona?
Yeah, we have more than 40 places like this in the city. We are now developing a plan also to grow food near the mountains, because in the past all of these was vineyards where we grew grapes to make wine. But now we are also working with the roofs, with the terraces, where we are developing a new plan where, 60% of the terraces of Barcelona are flat. And because the weather is so good and it doesn't rain too much, what we want also is to use those roofs in order to promote green spaces, also growing food and also producing energy. So that means that it's true that, the territory around is Catalonia, and Spain is a place where, in general, we can grow food, but we want also to bring part of this production to the city itself. Thank you.
Добрый день, спасибо за лекцию. Городской совет передает вам полномочия, и в рамках этих полномочий вы производите какие-то изменения, перестройки и так далее. Соответственно, это оказывает определенное давление на транспортные потоки, на мобильность. Ну, грубо говоря, если вы сносите развязку, вам, наверное, очевидно, что, скорее всего, кто-то поедет по-другому, им будет тяжело добираться и так далее. То есть возрастает некое транспортное давление на бизнес, давление на мобильность бизнеса. То есть, ну, например, там, тяжелее довести до рынка продукта, даже из соседнего района. Понятно, что местные жители опять-таки начинают как бы роптать. Ну, как вы вот умудряетесь совмещать вашу преобразовательную деятельность и вот такие казусы, когда возникают проблемы там, с передвижением, еще с чем-то и так далее?
Thank you. There are several answers. The first answer is that the young people is not interested anymore about buying cars. So in Barcelona, we developed a system of sharing bikes. There are more than 150,000 people using those bikes, and the young people are more interested about some system that is more human scale, like bikes, and they don't want, in a massive way, to buy cars. There will be new forms of transportation. Obviously, the people should be able to move, but the idea is that we make those highways because we were promoting that everyone should own a car. And every time we make a highway, the highway is collapsed because there are more cars. So what we learn in many parts of the city is that if we eliminate car mobility and we promote public transportation, the city becomes more human scale. Another question is that for delivery of food, we have some areas, for example, in the historical center, where delivery is produced mostly in the morning. Obviously, we allow from 8 to 12 that the cars and the trucks, they bring foods, goods, etc. But then in the afternoon, all of this is pedestrian areas. So that means that we will have highways around the city in the big scale, but in the center of the city, what we want to promote is public space. And people walking, people biking, people sharing cars, using electrical bikes, and using also public transportation. So that's why we are able to develop a project like the ANAS project, where we decide we want to eliminate 25 of the cars in the next 20 years of Barcelona. This is very clear. This is what we decide. This is the model that we want to develop. There are other cities, if you remember about New York City, in Broadway, they decide to eliminate also the cars, and they are putting chairs in order that people really appropriate themselves about the streets. So our idea is that the cities should be created at the scale, human scale, and that's why it's so important the idea of the neighborhood. If you have a library and a school and a swimming pool in a walking distance, you will not need to take a car in order to move from one place to another place. So there are several layers to your question, but at the end, the people in general is very happy that we are demolishing the highway.
Здравствуйте, хотел бы поблагодарить тоже за вашу презентацию, лекцию. Меня зовут Александр. Хотел бы расширить, вот передо мной молодой человек задал транспортный вопрос. Барселона — это, безусловно, агломерация, и агломерация достаточно крупная. Вы предлагаете решение проблем города за счет формирования комфортной и максимально привлекательной жизни для людей, кто живет в neighborhoods, как вы сказали. Но до этого на протяжении долгих лет Барселона развивалась как агломерация, и вы сами говорили, что есть большие дороги, которые активно забиваются автомобилями. И по этим транспортным потокам в город добирались люди, вовлеченные в эту агломерацию, задействованные в бизнесе, в экономике, в офисах. Вот. Путь, который вы выбрали, ну, он, безусловно, правильный и хороший, и город так должен развиваться, но вы не оценивали, как вот, может повлиять на экономику города и на экономику окружающих небольших городов Барселоны вот нарушение связи этой агломерации, потому что вы формируете некую такую среду в городе, где будет очень комфортно проживать жителям непосредственно, а вот людям, которые в настоящий момент вовлечены в эту агломерацию, они могут испытывать определенные неудобства, в том числе экономика вот этих маленьких городов, вовлеченных в агломерацию Барселоны, может испытывать эти неудобства. Вот, спасибо.
Yes, thank you. What we have in the metropolitan area and at regional scale is a very strong network of train. So obviously we have highways and roads, etc., but we need to think about the city of the future, a city based in public transportation, and also in the idea that what we need to do is to move information, but we should be more statical. In the industrial city during the 20th century, we were doing residential neighborhoods there and industrial neighborhoods there. And all the day, the people was moving from one side to the other. And that's why the cities collapse, because we are spending our time always moving from one side to the other. While if we think about new forms of economy, and I explained right now, we want to instead to send one chair or one car from China to Barcelona, we prefer to send a file. And we prefer to print and to fabricate things locally. And in order to do this, we need to bring back this idea of hybridization of economical activity and residential areas to all the city. So from that point of view, at the regional level, you see over there other cities where more than 50,000 or 100,000 people live. Those could be like neighborhoods of the central city, but what we need to promote is that they have both residential areas but also industrial activities and public facilities over there. We need to promote train and public transportation, and obviously some people will use car, obviously. But we need to think, I mean, you know that the city that you have here, Moscow, was thought by someone. The cities are not made by the nature. Someone make a drawing, and then we make cities. And we make cities following some rules that are economical or political or cultural, and based on the idea of our city, we define some cities. I mean, if we imagine Bauhaus were developing an idea of city where housing should be in one area and industry should be in another area. This was the modern city. And right now we realize that this doesn't work. This is a disaster because what it generates is the idea at that moment there were very few people. And few people were able to use cars to go from one place to another. But I explained at the beginning, we are more and more and more people. Moscow will be a huge city, obviously, and the question is, if all of you are all days, during the whole day moving, then you will lose a lot of time, and also you will lose a lot of money and energy by moving. So we could think about new model of cities for the 21st century. And this is what we are trying to do. My ancestors were inventing this drawing. You see the grid was drawn by someone, and we have been building this idea during many years. That's why we say we want to develop our new idea of city in the next 40 years. So it's not about business as usual, it's about thinking how you want to live and then transforming your city in this idea. I think we really can do it.
Vicente, maybe.
Hello?
Hello. No, just something very quick. Maybe also to help what Vicente is saying. it's also important to know there is also a scale difference, no? This city has maybe between 10 and 12 kilometers inside the city. Moscow maybe has 60 or 80 kilometers as a diameter, so it's a different scale. Here we have the complete Barcelona has 3 million people, Moscow has 12 million people, something like that, no? So in this picture, what you see that they are living 1.5 million in a very small place. That's why Barcelona is a little bit a dense city, and it's very important to know that when we talk about mobility, we think about people walking, not only about cars. Mobility, the half of motions that people is using for going to work, they can go walking. So then using the city walking is also thinking about mobility. It is, of course, quite a more interesting kind of motion as going by car, no?
У меня один короткий очень вопрос. Срок реализации вашего проекта и этапность. Я имею в виду парка. Парка.
Okay.
Okay, so the first operation that would allow the park to actually come in place is the tunnel that is being built. So, well, first there's the demolishment of sort of the elevated ring road that we're talking about, and then there is the tunnel that is going to be built below grade to allow all the cars of Gran Via to sort of cross below and liberate the space of the park square. And then the end of the tunnel is supposed to be 2018. So the park will start to be built probably from the beginning of 2016, and then it will be in phases. And I mean, the last phase will be completed, of course, after the tunnel. So it's possible to make a part in the north, a part in the south, and then once the tunnel is put in place, to sort of do the last phase over the tunnel. So it's linked to also the infrastructure operation.
Финальная часть, когда планируется? Когда вы планируете закончить парк?
So maybe the city could answer that. I mean, I think it's probably, I don't know, around 18, no? Right after the tunnel, so 2018.
Это очень быстро.
Yeah, I think there's a concern of the city to sort of, it's a very central space. It's a space that has a lot of things going on around it. There's offices, there's universities, there's a very dense residential neighborhood. So there's a sort of a desire to not let the space die and become sort of a residue of the city. But we are recognizing its centrality and its importance. So that's a part of the reason of why this is being done so quickly.
Hello. You were talking about some very, very big future, like 40 years from now. And didn't you think about, and you were talking about some global economical things. So didn't you think about more middle term things like the inequality, or what is your projection of the population, for example, the immigration from so this economical issues like unemployment, which is in Barcelona it is better than in other throughout Spain, but it's still high as far as I know.
Yeah. In fact, now there is a crisis. In the last years, we have a huge immigration of people from Latin America and Africa. And then we were not expecting to grow. And then right now, Catalonia has like 7.5 million people, while some few years ago, we were only like 6 million. So we are not expecting to grow a lot. But my vision is that if we want to become a global city, the city of Barcelona should grow. The question is what the people will be doing. And the future that you mentioned, it looks to be very futuristic, but what you are doing now. What we are doing now is this. We are taking young people and we are educating them. We are giving tools to them. We are showing them, teaching them how to invent things. In the future, I mean, in the industrial economy, there were the entrepreneur, the people, the owners, and the workers. And the workers were working, and they were in the shopping mall buying things. But in the information economy, the economy is more based about people that are inventing things and are more entrepreneurs, and then they are producing things. And from that point of view, it's not about waiting someone to give a job. It's more about creating your own job. From that point of view, Barcelona is a place where, for us, education is really very important. We are also promoting young people that want to develop their own company. That's why we are looking for new forms of economy. If we are thinking some big company here to make a big factory and then to look for employees, that's over. We are not working for this. We are looking for new forms of economy, about the economy of city innovation, about the green economy, about electrical mobility, about digital fabrication, about making technology for computers. This is, and also producing green food, also part of tourism. So from that point of view, the idea that we eliminate cars. In the past, the future was like elevated roads, floating cars, and spaceships to the moon. This is great. We'll arrive to Mars. Maybe some Russian people will arrive to Mars.
The movement was the best thing.
Yeah. But
like
right now,
futurists.
For now, the future is about walking in the streets, buying fresh bread, people fabricating the skateboard. It's about a kind of human scale about the future. And we'll be doing this because we'll be connecting to the world, we'll be sharing knowledge. This is the kind of future we would like to build. And this is what we are doing right now. I mean, the demolition of the highway is a radical statement about the future that we want for our city.
Sorry, one more question. What do you think about the tourism? Are you planning to grow? How much do you plan to grow it? Because I think that this is the crucial part as well, like education and.
You know, there are many different kind of tourism. Because when right now I will be counted as a tourist in Moscow. Because I am a visitor, I took a plane to here, I will be counted as a tourist. And I am not, let's say, exactly like a tourist. So that means that with the transportation, there will be more people moving from one place to another place. And I think this is good. We will produce food and things locally, and we will move information, and we'll move ourselves. That's very clear. And about the tourists, the fact that the people are moving around, that's part of our long story. We like to learn more places. And from that point of view, what we need to do is to avoid to transform our cities into theme parks. A theme park like Disneyland is a place where there is no inhabitants and all of them are tourists. So the second stage could be Venice. There are only few inhabitants and then there are a lot of visitors. And then in Barcelona we have an average of 5 to 7% of visitors while the rest are local people. When you start to have like 20% of visitors, you start to become, let's say, a theme park. And we don't want to be at all a theme park. So from that point of view, we are promoting other places where the people can visit. In London, there are like 14 million visitors per year. Barcelona has half, like 7 or 7.5. So that means that we can learn how to have more visitors, but also more distributed around the city.
Hello. Many years ago, Jose Sibilio came here in Moscow. Do you know Jose Sibilio? and excited us about his work with development of Barcelona city from Olympic game time. And my question, have you any connection with his works, developing the same ideas or contradict?
Sorry, to whom?
Jose Osibilio.
Jose Acebillo.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Jose Acebillo was the person that was before than me. Maybe he was the person that built the highway. So I have been following his project, but now by demolishing it. So there is some continuity, yes.
Thank you.
Can I ask the question? Yes. Thank you, first of all, for the brilliant lecture. And I wanted to ask, how do you work with the people, with the public opinion? And do you have some institutes or public hearings, maybe? How do you get the permission of people living in these neighborhoods that you're talking about and in the city on the projects that you are planning on to reach your beautiful goals? Well, how do you speak with them, and how do you get?
Well, I will say that we have every time we develop a project, we create a group of people with a local association where we discuss the project. We have right now more than 50 of those discussions right now in Barcelona. And maybe Anna can explain how is your interaction with the local people.
Yeah, in the case of Glorias, it's very active. The neighbors are very, very active. So the way it's done, it's the project evolves and it's presented in sort of work sessions where the city presents how the project is evolving. So it's more sort of a presentation, and there's other sort of more like workshops where people would sort of attend with ideas, with replies to what was presented, and they work more on themes. So there's a sort of all this framework organized, the very organized framework of exchange between the neighbors and the city and the people who are doing the project. So it's very, 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 and what the neighbors say is, in the case of Glorias, which is the case I know, is important. I mean, it's very important. There were two representatives of the neighbors in the jury of the competition. So, and then they're still very active in the program, in the uses, in the form, and I mean they sort of have visions on all sorts of issues.
Tony, can you explain the question of the library, how the citizens were involved?
Well, no, this is also something quite interesting also because in a sense, when you make a project about with a certain importance with the city, you cannot make a project and then ask, because then when you ask and the project is done, then what happens is the people they say, well, why did you ask if everything is already decided? No, it's important to make it in the proper moment. No. At the beginning, and you have to make the project at the same time that you are working, they have to ask, and they can propose something. So the most important thing of making this kind of interaction with people, which is very important to involve them in the project of their city, which is very important to understand that we are the architects, we are the technicians, but it's going to be the projects where they're going to be made for them, is that they really understand that you are asking them what's their opinion in the right moment, and you are still ready to introduce their opinions in the process and in the project. No, in the library that we saw before, there was a competition. We won the competition, but then we expressed the idea. We explained the project. We introduced some things of the project. I have to say that they were very happy with the solution. They wanted to keep the garden, so they liked very much. Something they would say was always introduced to the project, and the process was very simple. No?
Sir, can I ask a little bit more? Do you work with the representatives of the municipal organization, or you work with the people who live there? You do you need to get a permission of some part of the people living in the district, or you just need to get a permission of representatives?
In one hand, we as the city, we can develop the project, but for example, in order to approve the budget, we need to go to the council where the budget is approved. So there are some legal issues related with this, but in parallel, the people in general must agree about the development of the project. If the people doesn't agree, at the end it's impossible to do anything. But on the other hand, there are some legal issues related with the budget, for example, that must be approved by the council members.
Thank you.
I wanted to add something. In the case of Glorias, this was even taken a step back because Glorias has been an area that has changed a lot. If you compare it to other areas of the city, that this last interchange is only 20 years old. So it's sort of an area that has it's never fixed because it's never really worked. So there was a compromise done in 2007. There's a lot of demands from the neighbors, and that's one of the things that started to move the project. And a compromise was signed between the city and the neighbors in 2007 of the things that they wanted for this place. So the facilities around it, and it was meant to be a park. And this was a long time before the competition. So when we did the competition, we got this compromise, which was already the program of the neighborhood. So it's not that the neighbors were brought in after to sort of give their opinion on what was being done, but they were also the designers of the space in the very first stage.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Good evening. Thank you very much for a very informative lecture. I would like to know a little bit more about social issues that you have in Barcelona. How does your work reflect these issues? For example, social weak groups such as students or people with migration background. For example, I know that in Rabaul you have a lot of houses that where a lot of people are living in, so it's a lack of a living place or lack of really cheap living place. Are there some social projects that you plan in a nearest future?
Well, what the first thing I would like to say is that Barcelona is a city where we try not to have a periphery. If you think about what we saw in the past, for example, in France, where you have a rich center and a poor periphery, it's very clear that when someone came from outside, they go to the periphery. And then it generates some kind of segregation between the locals and the people from outside. So our tradition really is to integrate everyone that come to Barcelona very fast. So for example, when the grid of Barcelona was developed, the rich people used to live in the first floor, and then the poor people used to be in the upper floor. But then in the same staircase were living rich and poor people. There was some areas where here there were the rich, and over there were the poor people. So this is a kind of tradition that we are still working on it. It's true that when there is a crisis, those people that are immigrants, that maybe they bought an apartment in the highest moment of the economy, now they are having really difficulties. So from that point of view, we have a very active, in one hand there is really a crisis because the banks are still there are people that are losing their house and they must be away. It's very strong. Let's say there is very strong kind of capitalistic approach about if you don't pay, you lose your house. So in another situation, then this will generate really a social problem because people without housing really will be very difficult here. But part of our work from the administration is to provide, in fact, houses for everyone. So we have some rental houses for people now. For example, we decide to sell 50% of the parking. We have many buildings for parkings in order to earn money and then to be able to build social housing. So that means that in moment of crisis, the two things we need to provide is housing and jobs. And we are trying to create jobs by new forms of economy, not thinking about only about the old economy, but about the new economy. And about housing, what we are doing is, in many places here, we are developing social housing. Also, in Plaza de las Glorias, that is over there, we'll have also social housing. And in the Raval, that this is where I live, so I have people from Pakistan, from China around, great people. I learn many languages with them. And in general, the schools are crucial in order to promote the social integration. Public schools in Barcelona are really very good, and then the kids can go there and they mix with other kids, and this is also a very good way of integration. Obviously, in moment of crisis, there are people that are suffering, and what we try to do from the administration is try to minimize the suffer.
Извините, еще один вопрос. Переосмысливая городское пространство, насколько тяжело манипулировать коммуникациями, то есть вода, газ, там, свет, электричество, канализация, там, где-то зарыть трубы, где-то задействовать дополнительные мощности. Насколько это тяжело именно вот в процессе, насколько это сдерживает процесс переосмысления того, что есть? Насколько это мешает или помогает, наоборот, двигаться вперед? Спасибо.
Sorry, I didn't understand exactly your question. Well, now I understand. You were asking before, imagine that this street, we decide to remove 20% of the cars, and we remove 1 or 2 lines. Or this street, we decide to make it pedestrian, that this is what already we did. And obviously, we need to open the street for delivering during some time. So that's why it's more and more important the use of information in the public space. Right now we have lighting and we have water for irrigation of the trees, but now we are introducing also information technology. So that's why Barcelona maybe is the first city in the world that developed a plan about how we want to integrate all these telecommunications in the public space. We set up a new rule that every time that we develop, you see this is the light post, and we want to have a network of Wi-Fi and sensors along the whole city. We did some tests in this area, and we developed this cylinder. Instead to have the cameras and the technology exposed, we try to integrate with a good design. So from that point of view, in the next 20 years, the whole city will be covered with Wi-Fi. And also, obviously, in order to do this, we need to open the networks in the street. But by having more information, we'll be able to open a street for cars or to close for cars, or to have more light or less lighting. For example, we have some streets when there is no one in the street, the light of the light post is reduced. And then when there are people walking, then the lights is on. So from that point of view, we really are trying to use technology of information into our public space.
Извините, вдогонку к этому вопросу. Извините, я уточню. Вы сократили несколько полос движения, сделали зеленую зону. Количество воды для полива там на 20% увеличилось. Где ее взять? Или, например, или вы сносите хайвей, у вас появляется избыточная мощность электрическая, но у вас есть подстанция. Что с ней делать? Ну и вот, собственно, в чем вопрос был мой. Где-то ресурсы используются больше, где-то меньше. И как ими манипулировать?
In Plaza de las Glorias, we are digging the ground and we are taking a lot of water for irrigation. In fact, in Barcelona, we have a huge amount of water underground, and we are using more and more local water for doing this. And about the rest of infrastructures, we have good engineers, and we try to have a good balance on this. Maybe one long question. It's the first time I am having a lecture like this, but there is other people looking in that direction. Maybe they are waiting for the cinema. It's great.
Thanks for interesting lecture. But I have another question. As I was in Barcelona, I saw there was an amazing district. If we say we are in Rambla, in front is a square, in the back is sea. I say about right side districts. The buildings are too narrow, but it is a historical and interesting part of the cities. But the apartment doesn't have sun in their flats. How do you have any plans for insulation of that flats? I think it is inconvenient to live in a sunny city, but don't have sun in the flats. Do you have any insulation program for that flats? Thank you.
You describe very well my apartment. I live in a place like this, so this is part of the history. I mean, sometimes you don't have too many sun, and that's why the new extension of the city was invented in order to receive more sun. But then you have other good things because you can walk to buy bread. You can choose. In Barcelona, we have like 9 different typologies of urban fabrics, and more or less you can decide where you want to live. So there are some people that like to live in the historical center because you have many shops around and you prefer to do like this. This is where I live, and all of you, you are more than welcome to Barcelona and to my house. Thank you very much.
Just,
Дорогие
I think we have to finish because I think something else goes on. But I want to tell something just to close all this trilogy. For one side, I think closing with Barcelona, you can see that is a developing city that is asking for capital, talent, and creative talent to come. And then it's a city that is now investing its energy in not building something new, but using what is already existing. And it is great, I think, because we don't have to keep developing and then make extensions of city, but really work what is already has existing there. Patios and all this kind of, actually in the center of the city, yes, it's true. There is a lackness of light. But there is also plans and proposal from architects that one thing also the city council is doing now is creating like a sort of let's say group of architects thinking about cities, and it's something that they are thinking also about how you can open the patio and then to make entrance from the big patio and then to give light, and then suddenly maybe you have also light in the first floors, and then more other ideas. But you have seen, maybe, I don't know if all of you have been here since the first episode, but you have seen the vision of the developing housing in Amsterdam, especially all the parts of the social housing, how it was built in the last 10, 15 years, and how is now the main idea of Amsterdam is also working with existing. The developing London, especially with the regeneration of part of the city, not only for the Olympic Games, but also previously with the South Bank of London, with the Tate Gallery and so on. How was the vision of the city also? This is not a real city architect in London, it's more a group of architects working it like a network. And now we see now the vision of Barcelona. Each one of them has a strategy. And that is the most important thing we want to transmit to you. Whenever kind of building or project you do, you have always to keep in mind to work in different kind of scales all the time. because otherwise, I mean, this is the only way to make quality and then to create really something good. I think we just close it now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Strelka, for having been organizing this. Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy.